So, well, it's always, for me, the big thing is to really, how Babaji came into my life is, I think, the most powerful, really, thing that happened in all my life. There was a time in my life when I was going through a difficult time, like I suppose a lot of devotees and unfortunately it's the human nature, isn't it? We learn usually only when we are pushed to. And at the time I was still living in Germany and was playing in a band, and we lived in a communal house, beautiful big communal house, and came to the point where the record company started to knock on the door. But actually for me, the story was already finished inside. It didn't go anywhere anymore for me. It wasn't my message. I was always in my heart to give a positive message to people. I always felt that music is there to uplift people, to give something positive. And that wasn't the case anymore, really. It was split down the middle, the band, and people wanted to sort of talk about political things, all the bad things that go on, and I thought, no, everybody knows about this, So I had to make a decision. Also, I was in a relationship with a singer, woman, and that didn't work out anymore either. And so I had to really make, it was decision time. So in late 81, early 82, I decided I had to stop. I needed change. And looked at I was a year planner, and said, okay, I don't want to be, I want to do it in a friendly way. So I want to give everybody else plenty of time to, if they wanted to carry on, to look for a replacement. And I said, early 82, I then called everybody together and said, look, it's my decision, I want to stop this. I don't want to also sign any record contracts, but I will carry on until the 6th of June 82. I'll never forget that day, because that I looked at it and I said there was a sort of biggish concert planned, that'll be my last concert, and so that'll give you several months' time to, if you want to carry on, to find a replacement for me. And so everything around me sort of fell to bits inside, everything sort of changed, and I didn't know where it would go to, but that was my decision. And I didn't also look to India, I didn't look for guru, I just want to change. But I must say that I always had through my upbringing, a deep connection to God, and in particular to Jesus, because that's where we grew up in Western Christian society, and that actually never left me. So the 6th of June arrived, and we were sitting in the kitchen, had already packed our sort of equipment, ready to go to the big concert, but the atmosphere was quite sort of a bit tense and depressed, sitting around the kitchen table, because everybody knew it was my last day. And as we were sitting there, the telephone rang, and our bass player went to the telephone and came back and said, Birshan is back from India. I must say that Birshan is an old friend of mine. We grew up in the same town. And he, like me, we were hippies, really, the hippie generation. So he had gone to India, his thing took him to India, where all the sort of hippies used to hang out. And he used to always have this beautiful long hair, And he didn't say Birshan, he said Band, which was his sort of German name, really, his Christian name. And I didn't know him as Birshan then. And that, with this message, it felt to me like a physical hand went to my heart and squeezed. And it was really scary. I was terrified, actually. And I couldn't talk to anybody, I couldn't share to anybody around the table because it was too tense and whatever. So I just got up and ran out of the kitchen and out into the garden. We had this huge, large garden, and I sort of gasped for air. And I remember it was a very hot day. And I thought I had a heart attack. And then suddenly realized, well, it can't be. I'm sort of still walking around the garden. I can't have a heart attack. I mean, yes, I did have a heart attack, but I didn't understand what sort of heart attack I had. And I thought, what's happening to me? What's happening to me? I was terrified. I was shaken, and I suddenly realized, well, that happened when the message came that my old friend was back from India, and so that's all I knew, basically. That's what was happening. Anyway, he also said that he would come the next day. He would sort of first visit his sister and then come the next day, because he always then moved in with us, because when it's a big house and whenever he came back from India, there was always usually room free for him. So the next morning it happened, the next day, it happened to be me to open the door when he just arrived. I opened the door and I looked at him. And I thought, wow, who is this? He had shaved head, he had a chota back there, and this big smile. And he had completely changed. Totally transformed. I thought, what happened to you? Yeah. And yet he's not a great communicator. He's actually not a great communicator. So anyway, he said, can I move in again? I said, of course, so this little room, so there's a few things that he had with traveling. And so I left, he sort of got his room bit together, and then I sort of went to see him in the room, and he had set up an altar with a picture of Babaji, this young, very strong picture of Babaji, and incense. I could smell the incense, and I was immediately sort of transferred to some other place, different place. So I spent really virtually all my time with him in this little room, and trying to squeeze things out of him. And looking at this picture of Babaji, who I didn't know. And part of me was terrified, which I now know, of course. It was the ego. The ego knew it was 5 to 12. But my heart was really pulled. So about 3 days later, we sat in the garden, beautiful, warm summer's day, and Birshan said to me, look, he said, the next time I go to India, I'd really love you to come and meet Babaji. And something out of the depth of myself just came out and said, yes. And I was just like listening to my own voice. And that night, Babaji came into my dream for the first time ever. And I think this was really then sealed. I had to, after this dream, I knew I had to go, and the dream just completely shook my whole being, and I trembled. I trembled. It was. I knew it was very early in the morning, and it was still dark. And I looked down at myself, and I had this lungi, which I didn't also know what this, just waist sort of cloth wrapped around my waist. I saw myself had a shaved head, and I turned around, and there was Birshan behind me, sort of the same lungi and shaved head, and we were on the edge of the jungle, really. And he sort of pointed to this little hut at the edge of the jungle. He said, "Go." So we moved towards this little hut, and he kept encouraging me, to sort of move on to this, approach the hut. Eventually we sort of arrived there, and I walked to the door, and I opened the door, and I saw the image, which I now, of course, know it was Ganesh, a picture of Ganesh, hanging opposite the entrance. At the time it was just this amazing being with an elephant head, and a small room, and then suddenly out of the edge of my eye, I sort of saw Babaji sitting on his bed, which of course now I all know. Sat down on his bed, but he looked different than the photograph. He was more choppy, was bigger, like more sort of motherly. Anyway, he said, "Come." So I went over, and he pointed next to him on the bed. He said I should sit down there. So I sat down there, and he pointed, "Birshan, sit down there." And he started pushing his elbow in my ribs, starting to sort of joke around with me. And he told me things that I loved to do when I was a boy. And I thought, how does he know these things? And the energy kept rising at the same time. So the energy got higher and higher. And he kept telling me things about when I was a boy. And I suddenly felt he wanted me to remember our relationship. And I tried really hard, and I couldn't. And he spotted, of course, my dilemma. So at one point he went like this. And I heard this, I still get goosebumps, I heard this cosmic music. It wasn't like flute playing. It was cosmic. And it was inside myself, it was everywhere. And I woke up, bam, like this. And I sat upright in my bed, and I was drenched in sweat. I was wet, and my heart was going boom, 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 boom. And I looked at my watch, and it was 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was totally shaken. And so I waited until sort of about 6 o'clock. I knew Birshan would be up, and he would do his whatever, I didn't know at the time, puja. So he would do his things, and I would want to go and see him, because also, of course, he was in the dream. So I waited very impatiently, sort of, and then I went to his room, and Birshan was still doing his little puja, and I was really sitting there and waiting, come on, I was very anxious to tell him. So when he was finished, he sort of looked at me and knew something had happened to me. He said, "What happened, And I said, and so I shared this dream with him. And he said, "Wow." He said, "Babaji." He said, "That's Babaji's room in the ashram, what you described." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yes, this is all the movements you do, the way you describe him, the way he looks now, this is Babaji." And I thought, now I have to go. There's no way I can now sort of go. Nothing happened. I have to go. And it took me about nearly 5 months to get everything sorted. I had to let go of all my past. I had to let go of sort of musical instruments, everything had to go. Yeah, I had to finance, of course, my trip to India. And he made me work really hard. We sort of had to work really hard, physically really hard, to get everything sorted. And then in November '82, I went to India. We went to India together. Birjan and I went to India, and I remember the time arriving at Katkodam. At the time, there was this chai shop down at the end of the riverbed, and we sat down. We had a chai, and sort of Birjan said, and now we're going up to, walking up the riverbed, and I suddenly felt I wanted to do some penance for all the stupid things I'd done in my life, and I took my sandals off, and I had a rucksack, and I said, I'm going to walk barefoot up this riverbed up to Haidakhandi. I'm going to sort of do some penance, which I did, and we walked all the way up the riverbed, and sort of slowly approached Haidakhandi. I could see the temples, and I sort of saw a group of people in the distance, and I said to Birjan, is that Babaji in that group? And he said, most probably it's Babaji. And he said, let's take a bath, and we took bath, and then we sort of went up, and Birjan, of course, he had been there before. He said, oh, Babaji will be on the Gufa side, it's prasad time, it's lunch time, everybody will be over there. So we went there, and I was very excited, and so we came up to Gufa side, to this place where at the time everybody used to eat, and Babaji was there inspecting everything, walking around, and of course I recognized him from the dream again. It was very, very strong for me, very, very powerful for me. And Birjan went straight up to him. He made pranam. I also didn't know how to behave, what to do. I was completely green. And Birjan went up, and I remember he had a little bag of sweets with him, with a sort of golden sticker up on the top, where it was sort of wrapped up. And he made his pranam to Babaji there in the dust, and gave Babaji this pack of sweets, and Babaji peeled off that golden sticker and stuck it on his third eye. And then his head shot round, and he looked at me, and he said to Birjan, who's this? And Birjan said, it was a friend, Oh. And I just fell over into the dust, and he said, very good, and walked off. So it was my first physical meeting with Babaji. So Birjan said, let's eat, and I was completely blown away. And Babaji went off, and we sat down and we had food, and then we went over to the other side. Birjan said, now let's, we have to have a room, and we went over, and I think Loknath was at the time running the office, and so down in the dormitory, and so we rested a little bit, and I was just completely, I didn't know where I was really, and around half past 3 in the afternoon, Birjan said to me, now let's go and see Babaji properly, let's go and meet him properly. Okay. And we walked through the ashram from the dormitory, and Birjan said, there, that's where Babaji's balcony, we go down there, and which of course was the time, which I didn't know, in the afternoon he usually met local people, and had only sort of like a few Western people sitting with him, but it was the time for the local people, for the Indian people really, the mountain people. And just short before we reached the sort of door where it goes down the steps to Babaji's balcony, Birjan sort of says, oh, sorry, I have to go to the toilet, you go ahead. And I thought, oh no, I was sort of, I thought, I don't know if I can handle this, Anyway, I walked down, and Babaji was sitting on the edge wall, the balcony, and he was, which I now know of course, he had taken his second bath, which we also had taken, and he was cleaning his tongue and spitting down the wall. And of course, in the meantime, Vishnu told me, this Babaji is, it's a manifestation of God. And I thought, what? A God sitting on the wall, spitting down the wall, Suddenly my mind went all sort of, oh God, I don't know what's happening here. Anyway, I went, made my pranam, and I was so overwhelmed, and I just sort of sat down. I wasn't kind of aware of any, it was just sort of him. So I sat down, and sitting there for a little while. He didn't say anything to me. And I sort of looked, and there were sort of a few local people sitting there, sort of squatting on the floor, the mountain people, and they asked, sort of said things to Babaji. Babaji would say things back, and sometimes they laughed. They laughed actually quite a lot, so I thought, joking, And suddenly I sort of spotted this one Western man, which was around the house, and sort of orangey sort of robe, and shaved head, and he looked at me and said, I thought, what's he want? What am I doing now? Have I done anything wrong or what? And I suddenly realized that there was Babaji, there was me, and everybody was sitting opposite. And I thought, oh no, I should be sitting over there, And I was sitting actually on a little sort of rug. And I thought, okay, I'm going to steal myself sort of over there. And Babaji's hand went on my shoulder and said, no, you stay. And the door opened, and in the meantime Birshan had arrived and sat there. And it was a little bit the scene like from my dream, just in a different situation. Where his head said I should sit next to him, And then suddenly the door opened up, and Gora Devi, who I hadn't met, came down with 2 cups, metal cups, and gave one to me and one to Birshan. And I thought, hang on, this lady wasn't here when we arrived. And I suddenly understood that Babaji, of course, knew we were already arriving. He had sent her off to bring 2 drinks, one for Birshan, one for me. So I took it and I sipped, and it was nectar. It was cold, and it was hot there. I thought, this surely there's no fridge or so. It was cold, and it was fruity, and it was nectar in a way, and so I drank that, and I felt really honored, and I felt so welcome, and so I didn't know what to do with the cup afterwards, and somehow I knew it had to go away from Babaji, so I didn't know. So I reached as far as possible over there in the step and put the cup down, and his head shot around and said, "Not allowed!" And I said, oh God, heart attack, what have I done wrong? And somebody said, straight away explained to me, I think it was Shani, actually, Shani was there also, and he said, when you have something had on your mouth, it's not clean anymore next to Babaji, it should be clean, should be taken away, you should rinse your way out. Okay, but Gora said, I'll do it, so she took the cups and went off again. And I also realized that I was sitting on Gora's place. That was her rug, And then something really amazing happened. There was no child present. Actually, there was also, I don't know if there was, besides Gora, there was no woman present. And I sort of sitting there, sort of looking sort of straight at Babaji, trying to sort of kind of control myself in a way. It was shaking. He suddenly pushed a child into my lap. little girl, pushed it in, and pushed it right, madam. I was sitting out cross-legged, and suddenly I had this little girl sitting in my lap. And I thought, what's happening here? There was no little girl before on the balcony. Where's the little girl? It's just suddenly like this movement, punch, in my lap. And then he turned and put his hand again on my shoulder and said, "You, Kirtan." Kirtan, what's Kirtan? Again, I think Shani said, singing in the temple. And Babaji sort of nodded, that's what I should do. So I thought, that's now. Okay. And I made my pranam. I went up the steps, I went to the temple. And for the first time I sat down and there was a small group of people singing Kirtan, singing Om Namah Shivaya. And first I felt a bit self-conscious, sort of coming from a music background, you know. It seemed all a little bit like simple, it seemed all like people were out of tune, and you know, it was actually sort of, for my ear it was almost a bit chaotic, and I thought, but then I sort of looked at people's faces and I saw their devotion, and I joined in, and so I suppose I've never stopped since, really. So I realized he had given me instantly the key, Kirtan, that was not only for me, which I of course know, but it was, I mean, for me also the key to open the door to him, to God, to the quickest way to get access to him. And then, of course, to come back to the dream the next morning, I followed like a sheep a bit, you know. I sort of imitate, because I didn't have a clue what was going on. I just sort of, my friend of course helped me and what to do. That's now the program is this, you know. So the next morning we said, you know, in the mornings we go and take our bath, and then we go to see Babaji, and he will give us chandan. He will mark our forehead. So morning came, we went down to the river, had a bath in the river, and went up, we sat down, and there was a bit of time of meditation. And then we went to Babaji, went to his room, and of course at the time, there was November, at the time, there weren't many people really around the ashram. It was always quite intimate. So we came down with maybe 20 people or so, walked around, squeezed past the fire pit under the tree to his room, and I had actually, or I didn't think, I hadn't thought about my dream anymore, really, because all the presence was just completely overwhelming. It was in his presence. And as I entered the room, of course, opposite the door was the picture of Ganesh, and there was Babaji sitting on the bed, and he said, "Come." And I thought, I'm in my dream. But the difference was, of course, there was other people there, you know, people in and out. So I went up and I did my pranam, so I saw that person in front of me, they do this, so I did the same. And I looked down, and he made me this mark on my face like this. And I sort of knew that some people had come out like this, some people, you know, and I got up, and I knew, because the next person wanted to, you know, have their turn. And I got up, and as I wanted to leave, he said, "You take this." And on the side, there was a yellow kurta and a white lungi line that he had already put there. And he wanted me to take that. So I took that, and I felt like Christmas. I felt like a child. I felt like a boy. And yet all this wasn't really consciously, I didn't really consciously see all the things. All the feelings I felt like. So I went out and I sat down like everybody else by the fire. And so yeah, it felt like real Christmas to me. And I knew I had my first sort of outfit, and somebody said, well, that's, from Babaji, he used to sort of wear these things, and, a couple of times or whatever, and now after, well, it took a while to sort of find the connections in a way. A few days later in the night, I went for darshan, and I did my pranam in the kirtan hall, and he suddenly pulled me up to really pushed my head against his belly, and he said, "You named Gopal Hari," and sort of woo went like this, and again I sort of walked away, and I thought, what's this, So I had to ask, I said, what's Gopal Hari? My name. And what I experienced at that moment, my past and my old name was like washed down the river. It disappeared. It's just gone. My past had disappeared. And so I asked, what is the meaning of Gopal Hari? So somebody told me, well, Gopal is the boy Krishna, and Hari is one general name for God, or also when Krishna was a man and he was an advisor in the king's court, they used to call him Hari. I didn't even know Krishna. What is Krishna? Who is Krishna? As well as one form of God, so he told me. And a few weeks later, I was asked, my karma was to paint the roofs, the domes of the temples on Uferside, and I did this with Nila from Germany. And like we do now, many times the question is, how did you get to, how did Babaji introduce himself into your life? How did you get to Babaji? So I shared this train with her, and when I came to this, she said, "Oh, Krishna!" And suddenly it was like, I suddenly had this sort of the red thread. It suddenly, oh God, yeah. So suddenly I had the connection. Suddenly there was a sort of there was something binding everything. There was something, and again it sort of just confirmed to me, God, Babaji, he knows all. He knows it all. He knows all these things, but he doesn't sort of give it to you on the platter, he makes it in a very sort of, it's almost like he's a director of a theater, in a theater, and everybody's playing, and he sort of lets things unfold and reveal in the course of time, and which was so wonderful. So I suddenly thought, so